From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. We begin in Venezuela, where tens of thousands of people have marched in Caracas and throughout the country in celebration of 20 years of the Bolivarian Revolution. Social movements gather in the heart of the capital city to laud the work, struggles, and achievements of the last 2 decades, which began under Hugo Chavez. President Nicolas Maduro received a warm welcome as he arrived at the historic Bolivar Avenue. He said that he supports the National Constituent Assembly proposal to hold parliamentary elections this year.
Do you know what is the crisis that the National Assembly is going through, the bourgeois legislative power? Do you know what they're going through? They have their own agenda. They have the evaluation, the constitutional evaluation to go ahead with elections, parliamentary assembly elections for this year. I agree with this. We have to legitimize again the election power of the people, and we go back to transparent elections with guarantees from the people. Do they choose a new assembly?
The government of the empire led by Donald Trump, with the macabre plan tailored by Donald Trump against Venezuela, has announced that they are against dialogue, and if the government of the state is against dialogue, they favor what? They favor coup d'etat that they have prepared, finance, and direct from the military intervention against Venezuela, from the war. I tell you, Donald Trump, you have been fooled. You have been completely fooled. John Bolton, Mike Pence, and Mike Pompeo. They are 3 war falcons that are obsessed with Venezuela. And you have been fooled. You who believe you are the emperor of the world believe that Venezuela is going to surrender and obey your orders. No, that Venezuela will not surrender. Venezuela continues forward. Venezuela is rebel. Venezuela is free. We are going to keep is to prevail with the interest of Venezuela. And if they hit us, we will hit them stronger to produce more gold, to produce more wealth, and to have the resources that Venezuela needs for its development, for its well-being. No one. No one will weaken us when fighting for Venezuela. This is a fight to defend our dignity.
Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza also addressed the crowd, saying that the U.S. is only interested in Venezuelan oil, but the Venezuelan people won't allow them to take it.
The person in the White House, Mr. Donald Trump. Why? Why do they have such an obsession with us? Are they concerned about you? Are they concerned because the schools are lacking materials? Are they concerned because we have been blocked and we do not have enough of some products? What do they want? Oil. Oil. You know what they want. We are going to defend our wealth, our oil. We're going to defend oil minerals. We will defend our water, our lands. We're going to defend our children.
Jorge Arreaza also said the petrol company PDVSA belongs to Venezuelan people.
When finally, after 2002, when Commander Chavez had control over PDVSA, here we have people of PDVSA, right? When the people were able to take control over their oil wealth, we started governing the country.
People gathered to celebrate the revolution, assured that they want to work together with the government for the peace of their country.
We are people of peace, we are people of harmony, we are people of comradeship with other brother nations. We don't want war, but all the people who are here, all the nations who are here, they don't have weapons, but they are armed with our national constitutions. We are willing to give our lives to our country.
We are here to show the international media that has waged a war on Venezuela that we also have the capacity to mobilize people wide across Venezuela all day through, and throughout Bolivar Avenue in Caracas, the historic avenue where once Commander Hugo Chavez gathered us to defend the Bolivarian Revolution. Today the nation is in the streets, the men, women, children, the elderly with the morals of Chavez in their hearts, with their knee to the ground, fusil at the shoulder and bayonet ready to defend the Bolivarian Revolution, the peace, the sovereignty of the homeland. Long live Commander Chavez, and long live our President, Nicolas Maduro.
Our correspondent in Caracas, Luis Tavera, brings us more.
Today's
been a day of demonstrations in Venezuela, a day where people have come out in force to support democracy. Venezuelans loyal to the Bolivarian Revolution began to gather in the Bolivar Avenue since the early hours. They also waited for the speech of President Nicolas Maduro. In his speech, Maduro made clear that his government is committed to upholding Venezuela's constitution. To do so, he once again stated his intention of reaching out to the opposition to hold talks. He also took the opportunity to thank Mexico and Uruguay on their positions of promoting a peaceful dialogue. As today marks the 20th anniversary of the Bolivarian Revolution, Maduro highlighted the fact that the law has always been respected, and that's why he's prepared to talk to resolve the situation. During his speech, he announced early parliamentary elections.
And in another part of Caracas, opposition supporters are staging demonstrations following calls by leaders of the country's right wing. Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez says the U.S. Vice President Mike Pence tried to hide the fact that he made a telephone call to Juan Guaidó a day before Guaidó named himself interim president of Venezuela. Rodriguez tweeted that Pence also remained hush about the meetings which Rodriguez says took place between Pence's agents and Guaidó. Last week, Friday, Pence met with Venezuelans living in Miami to rally support for Venezuela's opposition. Moving on, CARICOM has condemned the Secretary General of the Organization of American States for recognizing self-proclaimed Venezuelan leader Juan Guaidó as the interim president. In a letter on behalf of Caribbean governments, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis asked that the Secretary General clarifies his position, in that he did not have authority to speak on behalf of the organization when he declared his support of Guaidó. One of the most powerful unions in Trinidad and Tobago has thrown its weight behind Venezuela. President General of the Oil Field Workers Trade Union delivered the message of support to the country's South American neighbor.
We support President Maduro, Comandante Maduro, in his effort to govern the people of Venezuela and to deliver to them on their mandate, to provide for social support and to social justice for the people of Venezuela.
Barbados is committed to working towards a peaceful resolution of the situation in Venezuela. Prime Minister Mia Mottley made a statement and emphasized that dialogue is essential. She says the Caribbean must continue to be a region of peace at all costs. Mottley met with Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza on Friday following CARICOM talks on Venezuela. Expressions of solidarity continue to pour in from around the world. Bolivian President Evo Morales has strongly criticized the sanctions the United States imposed on Venezuela. President Morales said that they are not only illegal, but also inhuman and immoral. He pointed out that the main victims of these sanctions are the people of Venezuela. He urged that the United States to lift them in respect to international law. And the president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, has also expressed firm support to President Maduro and the legitimate Venezuelan government. He told the newly elected Venezuelan ambassador to Iran that his country will continue to deepen bilateral relations with Venezuela. President Rouhani also criticized the Trump administration for supporting the coup attempt. Venezuela solidarity groups in Brisbane, Australia, held a forum to support the legitimate government of President Nicolas Maduro. They are also denouncing U.S. interference. And in Turkey, people had rallied to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the inauguration of former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. The gathering took place in the capital, Istanbul, where they expressed solidarity with Venezuela and rejected imperialist intervention. Paraguayan social movements have also sent messages of support to the Venezuelan people and the Bolivarian Revolution.
From Paraguay, we reject the imperialism and Lima cartel interference in Venezuelan internal affairs. Unfortunately, Paraguayan president is part of that cartel, and he does not have legitimacy among the people. We want to tell all Venezuelans we are in total solidarity with them.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. The Secretary General of the United Nations has again emphasized his commitment to peace and dialogue in Venezuela. Through his spokesman, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the UN recognizes the elected government of Venezuela.
The Secretary General reiterated that what he's already said publicly in his letter, which is basically his concern regarding the crisis in the country and the impact that it is having with the Venezuelan people. He said the United Nations is ready to increase its activities in Venezuela in the areas of humanitarian assistance and development. However, he said that for this, the United Nations needs the consent and the cooperation of the government. The Secretary General again underscored that recognizing governments is not for the Secretariat and for member states, and he noted that his relations with member states, he respects decisions taken in particular by the General Assembly and the Security Council, and he reiterated in his letter the availability of his good offices to help find a political solution to the crisis.
For more on the situation in Venezuela, we were joined by Dan Cohen, a journalist with the Gray Zone based in Washington, D.C. We asked about opposition leader Juan Guaidó, who led violent protests in recent years and who has now been handpicked by Washington.
Now, the reason we're seeing Juan Guaidó elevated as the so-called interim president is because the people ahead of him in the party, Leopoldo Lopez and figures like that, have basically, most of them have left the country, come to the U.S., where they're now coordinating this attack, this coup with the Trump administration, or they're holed up in embassies, or some of them are in prison for violent acts, for leading violent demonstrations that have killed many people on the ground in Venezuela. So Juan Guaidó was the remaining figure who was clean enough to basically coordinate this coup with the White House. So he's a credible figure here in Washington, but on the ground in Venezuela, I mean, 81% of Venezuelans had never heard of Juan Guaidó until this month. Even opposition figures were shocked by this whole, declaration. So I would say no, he's definitely not a credible figure.
We also asked Dan why so few lawmakers have spoken out against their own government's intervention in Venezuela.
Well, we've seen a massive hysteria in this country since the election of Donald Trump about so-called Russian meddling, none of which has been proven, but in this case of blatant, open, even celebrated meddling, and I think meddling is a soft euphemism for what is, clearly just an aggressive coup d'etat in Venezuela, an attempted coup d'etat. And so none of these representatives were really willing to admit it. They didn't want to talk about it. They don't even consider what the Trump administration is doing in Venezuela as a form of interference. And it not only does it show the hypocrisy, it shows the arrogance, the imperial arrogance that is bipartisan throughout all of the Republican Party, and all of the Democratic Party, except for a couple of people, including Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who is now speaking out against this coup d'etat. And we see similar language coming from Ro Khanna in California, another congressman, and the Democratic Party presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard, who is also speaking out. So it's almost bipartisan consensus, except for a few people in the Democratic Party who are speaking out against this. And I think that's what Max exposed.
Just a day to go for the presidential elections in El Salvador, preparations are set for the polls. Thousands of polling stations are ready around the country. Over a dozen international observers have arrived in the country to monitor the elections. The voting will start at 7 a.m. local time and will be open till 5 p.m. Ahead of Sunday's elections in El Salvador, the Electoral Court has been distributing electoral packages in the country's 14 regions. Our correspondent in San Salvador, Ernesto Avalos, brings us the details.
El Salvador Supreme Electoral Court has announced that 1,595 station polls are ready for Election Day. Most of them are located in schools where police forces have already been deployed. New measures have also been taken to avoid any technology attack by hackers against the official website of the Supreme Electoral Court. It has also been reported that over 1,400 national and international observers will monitor the process. Salvadorans living abroad have returned to the country to exercise their right to vote.
We thank Ernesto for that report. People in Paraguay have demonstrated to demand justice for the victims of Alfredo Stroessner's dictatorship 30 years after the fall of his regime. Paraguayans took to the streets of the capital Asunción to call for justice and remember the victims of dictatorship. Relatives of the victims and social organizations gathered in front of the presidential palace to commemorate the end of Stroessner's ruling. Stroessner ruled the country from 1954 until 1989. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel has visited some of the areas affected by a tornado last week. Díaz-Canel made a stop in the municipality of Regla in Havana province, where he interacted with the affected people. He said the government is working on cleaning efforts and restoring electricity and water supply. At least 4 people were killed and hundreds were affected after a tornado hit Havana on Wednesday.
We know the problem we have faced is very difficult. It is no one's fault but nature. We are working on it. In Havana we have never faced anything like that. We don't have that experience, but now we need to focus in cleaning all rubble and to recover electricity and water.
On Friday, fragments of a meteorite were found after strong explosions reportedly rang out in western Cuba. Social media lit up as several people in the province of Pinar del Rio and nearby communities reported seeing a smoke trail in the sky and feeling strong tremors. Some also reported seeing a bright blue explosion in the sky. Researchers estimate upon entering Earth's atmosphere, the incoming rock was about 2 meters wide. Ancient tombs and artifacts have been found in the northeast of Peru. 3 chambers with pottery and copper ornaments belonging to the ancient Mochica civilization, well known for the quality of ceramics. The site dates back to the Middle Moche period, around 600 years after Christ.
We are facing the discovery of 3 tombs of the Mochica culture in its middle stage. These are burial chambers that contain skeletal remains surrounded by ornaments and wrapped in their attire of rank and command.
Thousands of Argentines took to the streets of Buenos Aires to protest against violence against women. Since the start of 2019, at least 22 femicides have been recorded in the country. Protesters also demanded the legislation of abortion and increase of budget tackling violence against women. The fight for legal and safe abortion gained a new momentum after a 12-year-old girl was raped and forced to give birth in the northern part of the country.
We demand the implementation and the fulfillment of the protocol for the integral attention of the people with the right to the legal interruption of the pregnancy.
Solís Calle. Presente. Gisela Solís Calle. Presente.
Approval of the project for the legalization of the complete interruption of pregnancy presented by the National Campaign for the Right to Safe and Free Legal Abortion. Legal abortion now.
Comprehensive secular sexual education, scientific with gender perspective through the education system.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Russia has suspended a Cold War era missile treaty a day after the United States pulled out. On Friday, the U.S. formally announced it was suspending its obligations under the agreement after accusing Russia of violating the treaty. The INF treaty was signed in 1987 by the U.S. and the Soviet Union to ban use of short and medium-range missiles by both countries.
We will provide a mirror-like response. The American partners have declared that they suspend their participation in the deal. We're suspending it as well. They have announced that they will engage in research and development programs. We will do the same. We have repeatedly, over a number of years, raised a question about sustainable talks on the disarmament issue. Notably, on all aspects we see, that is the past few years the partners have not supported our initiatives.
Thousands of Yellow Vest protesters march across Paris and other French cities rejecting police violence as the 12th weekend of action against the government begins. In Paris, protesters condemn the use of rubber bullets and police violence, which has resulted in about 1,700 demonstrators injured since protests began last November. Several people have suffered serious injuries from the so-called anti-riot flashball launchers. Iran's press TV journalist Marshe Hashemi, who has detained for 10 days in a U.S. federal prison, has slammed the material witness law that allowed her imprisonment.
There were no charges. I was shackled and taken there as a material witness. And I answered the questions they asked as far as giving evidence, and there was nothing to give evidence about. When we say that it's a fishing expedition, that's exactly what I mean. I feel that it was just a matter of trying to intimidate me. But no, there was nothing concrete in it at all. And I really believe that it was only due to the pressure from the press and also social media platforms that I got out when I did.
South Africa's left-wing Economic Freedom Fighters Party has launched its 2019 election manifesto in the capital Pretoria. Around 18,000 supporters gathered in the giant stadium to support party leader Julius Malema. Although the election date is yet to be announced, polls show that the EFF has risen in popularity and now stands in third place after the ruling party and the Democratic Alliance Party. Muslim women from around the world have marked the 7th World Hijab Day on Saturday. This year, the focus is ending stereotyping and demonstration against Muslims. Muslim women in New York convened on the steps of City Hall to mark the day. They also used the event to highlight the discrimination and prejudice that they face on a daily basis. The rise of far-right political parties across the world has led to a rise in attacks against minorities such as Muslims.
People always misjudge me, call them Muslim terrorists. Just because on the news they said a Muslim did this or a Muslim did that. But it didn't say any Christians did this or a Catholic did that. Why they keep saying Muslims? They're humans as well. They're just criminals. If they did something bad, don't call them a Muslim. They have no right to have that title.
And with this story, we come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find on our website at telsurenglish.net. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.